hamstring, posterior chain, where are we, right? So if he has that foot right there, that's not a good position. Why is that? If that foot is right here, so if that bone right here is right on the inside here, why is that not a good position? What's the difference between this position and that position? Or is there a difference? Hip flexor versus hamstring. So if I tell him to drop your foot to the ground and pull it up again, that's hamstring. If he kicks it out the back, that's a little bit of hamstring, but now he's got to engage this to pull it through underneath. Does that make sense? Versus here, put it down, pull the foot up to the butt, here, so I'm really tracking, okay? So that foot, if I were to look at where this middle part of his knee is, that foot is just behind. Does that make sense? Go ahead and stand with a good athletic position. Usually your hands or your arms are bent usually about 90 degrees. So you'll see people run down here, you'll see people run up here. These are just kind of like your rudders. They just kind of go along for the ride. The faster you run, you'll see this happen. Slower you run, it's just right here. These are not going to affect how fast you run. Style points. Okay? So, in this position, I just want you to get yourself into that position. First, go into an improper position. Use your hip flexor. Just go ahead and lift up your knee like you're pushing your knee forward. That's hip flexor, right? So when you do that, put your hand right back here and tell me if you feel your hamstrings engage. Then, pull your foot underneath your butt and tell me if you feel your hamstrings engage. Yes. Okay? So, again, go ahead and get into that proper figure 4 position. Okay? What's happening with the leg that's anchored on the ground? Straight, bent, slightly bent, right? So now, if you were to switch, go ahead and switch feet. Okay, switch it again. Do it like 5 times. Just bing, 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 bing. Okay, so is there a difference between what I'm doing here? Is this, what's the difference?
No bouncing.
No bouncing. Is bouncing good or bad?
Bad.
Why is it bad? It's unwanted energy, right? You're leaking energy, you're going to create more ground reaction force, right? Makes sense? So think of, and this is a kind of a nuance again, so something again, not in your notes, something a little bit additional. That foot just falls to the ground, it doesn't have to get pushed off to reclaim position. So from here, I'm just dropping, pulling, dropping, pulling. So instead of pulling, just think of dropping the foot. Does that make sense? Try that a couple times. So, does that make sense? There's a difference between, and we'll see that on the video, we'll actually see that push off. So that's one of the, and I bring that up now because a lot of people, when they start to learn the proper mechanics, they really want to focus on landing here and pulling, but you almost see them kind of bounding down the road, okay? So if I could, if I saw you run, I would put my hand right on top of your head, and your head wouldn't hit my hand as we run by. Does that make sense? Because that foot's just dropping underneath the hip, and you're just reclaiming it by pulling it right back up. If your head goes up and down like this, it's called vertical oscillation. And if you oscillate, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not efficient. Do it a couple of times, and then just stop at the top on either leg. Tell me what your foot's doing now. Is your foot flexed? Is it relaxed? Is it pointing? Where do you think it should be? Relaxed, right? So, can I use you again? Please. Okay, go ahead and turn sideways. So, I want you to, in a moment, you're going to pair up with somebody. One person's this is going to be your first coaching experience. One person's going to coach, one person's going to be subject. I'm going to take a look first at what that figure 4 position is. Think I need to do anything with them? Maybe just a little closer here. I'll tell them to put it here. What about your upper body? Where should that be? Externally rotated shoulders, chest nice and tall. Everything, remember, as straight as you can. Straight lines, good way to fall, right? So, from this position, if I'm comfortable with him right there, I'm going to tell him to go ahead and switch to the other side. Go ahead and do it a couple times. I'm just going to watch that back leg. Go ahead. So he's kind of kicking out the back a little bit, right? Instead of pulling the foot underneath the hip. Make sense? So once he does that, I'm also going to tell him to do it a couple more times. And stop. I'm going to see how loose that foot is. This foot should almost just be kind of dangling there, right? So if I drop down, boom, That foot's just kind of wiggling right there, okay? So remember, if you just, when you're going through the mechanics, because now we're going to split you apart and start to ingrain kind of what we've been talking about. Pull the foot under the hip. That's it. If you can remember to pull the foot under the hip, you'll be okay. Easier said than done, but there's a difference between pulling the foot under the hip here, right? So you can see where my foot's going. There's a difference between this and that, right? Yeah. Think about it mechanically. If I'm running down the road and I'm kicking out the back, am I using hamstring? A little bit, but not as good as I could if I was just leaning and falling. Did you hear the difference? Yes. Didn't just see the difference. Quiet, relaxed, less time on the ground. That goes out the back, it's going to be more time on the ground to reset all the time. So just pull the foot under the hip without using your hip flexor. That's the key. Okay? Those of you that coach people, if you see people jumping rope, which we do a lot of, right? So if you're jumping rope, is this the right way to jump rope, or is this? First or second way? Second way, right? Why?
Kissing the heels down?
Kissing the heels down. So that heel kiss component is really important. So we're just going to start doing that. Okay, so everybody right now in place. I just want you to pretend you're jumping rope. Just go ahead and hop up and down with good body position. Again, arms are up. What would your chest be doing if you're running? Front squatting. What does your chest do? Stays up, right? What do your shoulders do when you front squat? Externally rotate, right? So everything's nice and tall. So this position here, simple bunny hop, you just want to make sure your heels are kissing the ground. Simple, right? Okay, relax. So now, we talked about degree of lean. So if I break that lean or I go more than a couple of degrees, you have no choice but to go forward, right? So what we're going to do in this first drill, it's really simple. We're going to go, and I'll let them go like every 3 or 4 seconds. So what you're going to do is you're going to go 10 bunny hops, and then just jog it out to that group. So it's just going to be start up and down, start to lean a little bit, 10 times, heel kiss, and then you can just run it out. And practice just pulling your foot underneath your hip. Okay, front row, go ahead and go. Heel kiss, don't worry about jumping too high. Yeah. So if you're hearing a lot of noise out of your feet, what do you got to do? Just don't jump so high. Okay? As quiet as you can be. So again, you're trying to think as quiet as you can. 5 stationary, 10 forward, go ahead and go. Next group. 5 stationary, head up, shoulders up, arms up. We'll start to kind of put all that together. Next group, go ahead. Straight up and down to learn that heel kiss. Then you can go forward and then just fall low pull.